Hello, fellow law nerds. Welcome to another episode of Boom Lawyered, a Rewire News Group podcast hosted by the legal journalism team that really wants to wrap Dolly Parton in a bubble and protect her forever. We must protect her at all costs. I'm Rewire News Group's co-chief content officer, Imani Gandhi.
And I'm Jess Piccolo, Rewire News Group's other co-chief content officer. Rewire News Group is the one and only home for expert repro journalism that inspires you to tell 2025, knock it off, man, not Dolly. And the Boom Lawyered podcast is part of that mission. So a big thanks to our subscribers and welcome to our new listeners and viewers.
So for our first segment, we are going to talk about Childs v. Salazar in our What the Fuck is Going On segment. We got to talk about these oral arguments that happened on Tuesday, October 8th.
Okay, can I start on this one? Because I have I've got some mixed emotions here. Deputy Solicitor General Hashim Mupan. We got to talk about this guy. He's a really good Solicitor General.
Which is not great for us.
He was really good. And it's extra yikes for us because during arguments, the conservative majority was just like eating out of his hands. And I expect we'll see more of him at SCOTUS this term on behalf of the Trump administration. But I think what was really so upsetting for me in this, and I mean, this is just a straight up vibes check, is that from the Department of Justice and the administration, we're used to them just like being really incompetent. Like they're doing a lot of really bad stuff and it's all really dangerous, but they're also doing it really incompetently. Man, Mupan was very, very good in arguments, and that's distressing.
It's distressing, but he also was still lying,
Well,
right?
Like he's still a liar.
He's still a liar. I mean, yeah, great. He can lie with the best of them. He's more, oratory in his lies, but he kept talking about the harm that Childs was going to face, this Christian therapist who's suing, challenging the Colorado conversion therapy ban, because she's claiming in her lawsuit that she wants to change people's gender identity, but then she's also claiming that she's not, right? The whole basis of the lawsuit is that she's being prohibited somehow from providing this care to young people who are looking for basically faith-based conversion therapy treatment. So she says that on the one hand, but on the other hand, she says she's not trying to change anyone's sexual orientation or gender identity. So why does she even have standing to bring the lawsuit?
Thank you for bringing me back to reality, because while he's an excellent Solicitor General, you're right, he is a lying liar who lies and did in the arguments. And I think that really ties to the fact that what we saw on day 2 is that each term is getting more and more divorced from reality when it comes to the First Amendment and facts, right? We saw it in the Let Coach Pray case, right? We saw it in 303 Creatives, which we talked about last week also. And it's not just that the court is outcome determinative in its approach to the law in this area. It's that the conservatives and advocates are actively rewriting reality to help rewrite the law. It's like a massive national gaslighting project. And like you were saying, in this case, it was the threat of harms to Childs in terms of prosecution, and also the idea that there's this like massive group of youth that are being unserved right now because they're just clamoring for conversion therapy in Colorado and they can't get it. So what do? They like make up these Reddit posts. That's the place that this, vaulted institution has landed.
Right. Like the anonymous Reddit posts from people who are claiming that they are looking for conversion therapy. Like, we don't accept anonymous Reddit posts as evidence for the basis of a lawsuit. It's frustrating. And I really want to talk about one of the arguments that Mupan trotted out, this mirror image argument. So basically, the idea is that if Colorado can ban conversion therapy today, then let's say Colorado in the 1970s could have banned affirming therapy for gay people, and that would have been fine, right? Like trying to use homophobia as a way to take down progressive policies, right? Because obviously in the 70s, people thought that homosexuality was a mental illness. And so he's claiming, so would it have been inappropriate for a counselor to tell a gay person during the height of that sort of homophobia that, no, you're not mentally ill? Right? Because that's what the norm was. The medical consensus was that homosexuality is a mental illness. First of all, norms change, right? Medical consensus changes. Mm-hmm. And even Sam Alito, jackass that he is, was suggesting that medical consensus had been taken over by ideology. I don't know what ideology he's talking about.
The woke medical consensus.
The woke medical consensus has been taken over by this ideology that trans people should be able to exist as trans people, which means getting gender affirming care. But here's what I think is really critical here. the medical consensus when it comes to queer people is changing for the better, right? It's treating queer kids like people, not viewing it as a mental illness, something to be changed. So the argument that siding with Colorado here means that a therapist in the 70s wouldn't have been able to tell a gay person, no, you're not mentally ill. That's just dumb. That's a dumb argument. You know, what's really going on here is just an attempt to twist the First Amendment into a tool that lets Christian conservatives regulate speech in whatever way benefits them and hurts queer kids. Is it incidental? Is it speech incidental to conduct? Or is it, viewpoint discrimination? You got to look at who they're trying to help and who they're trying to hurt, right? We as a society have gone from persecuting queer people as mentally ill to not persecuting queer people. And now that we're not persecuting queer people, that's what bothers the Federalist Society 6 on the court.
I'm so glad that you brought that up because it really ties back to this idea of the conservative legal movement rewriting the facts to sort of fit their frame, not dissimilar to what they've done in the anti-abortion space. Because when the medicine is clearly on the side of expanding access to healthcare, expanding agency for marginalized folks, then what happens? They go and create their own research. So consensus is a moving target as far as MUPON and the administration is concerned, because consensus is only there to serve their particular social goals, which is not helping queer kids in this case.
Exactly. And I think that the lens of does this hurt or help queer people is the proper lens to look at this rather than some doctrinal jurisprudential, theory that is supposed to hold here, right? This isn't about free speech versus how it is healthcare professionals interact with their patients. It's not free speech versus medical regulation by the state, right? In Childs, this court is going to strike down conversion therapy bans. In Scrimeti, the court said that states can ban gender-affirming care. Certainly a person who opposes gender-affirming care but supports conversion therapy bans would say, well, one of them involves prescribing medicine, puberty blockers, and that's dangerous, and we don't know how it hurts kids, yada, yada. And the other just involves talking. But with this court and this group of Christian conservatives, I don't see that as making a difference.
No.
Right? I think there's a world where even if gender affirming care was just talk therapy, this court would find a way to ban it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So one day it's free speech in favor of Christian conservatives. The next day it's state power to regulate medical care in favor of Christian conservatives. The only through line is sticking it to queer kids.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Or you were talking about abortion. Let's tie this back to abortion rights. When states force abortion providers to read these government written scripts, well, back when states had abortion rights, when the states that have now banned abortion had these quote unquote informed consent laws that required abortion providers to read these government written scripts about how abortion causes breast cancer and abortion causes suicide ideation. And it means you're going to be afraid of vacuum cleaners every time you hear one because it's going to make you think of how they vacuumed out your womb, right? And so that's supposedly fine. We can force doctors to lie, and that's junk science, but it's okay, right? Abortion reversal, right? States want to force doctors to tell patients that medication abortion can be reversed when it cannot, right? But that's just regulating medical practice. Like we have to let these doctors say it's so hypocritical, and it really only matters who the law helps or who the law hurts. If it hurts queer kids and promotes Christian nationalism, then this court is all for it.
I think another very clear example of this is the way the court is treating parent rights right now. The parental rights movement is being absolutely reimagined under the conservative Christian legal movement as a way to control progressive outcomes. The parental rights of trans kids are non-existent as far as this court is concerned. The parental rights of religious conservatives who want to force a particular outcome on gender or sexual identity for their kids, well, hey, go for it. So really so many through lines where we can see the hypocrisy. And man, day 2 of oral arguments in this term, and the mask is off. It was before, but man, they made it real clear that they're just they're not even pretending anymore.
Yep.
Oof. Okay, well, look, I'll be honest, it feels a little jarring to be talking about national elections right now. It is October. I want some pumpkin spice and a little time in the mountains with the leaves turning. But, we're not even a year into Trump's term. That hurts. That actually just sucks to say out loud. I need to say that. SCOTUS is back in session. Like we said, this week has already been off the rails as far as the court is concerned. And yet, here we are about to do an elections adjacent podcast episode, everybody.
I mean, we've become the people I hate, right? The people talking about elections just too soon. It's too soon. We're a legal podcast, right? We're talking about the Supreme Court. We're not even supposed to be a politics podcast, but everything's political now. Everything
exactly.
is political now. And we got to talk about elections in October 2025.
That's one of the realities of this Trump reality that we have right now, is that it's all there. So thanks to the Trump administration's efforts to start trying to rig the next election, because let's be very clear, that's what they are trying to do. And the Texas GOP is offering up an assist in their efforts. We're dedicating an entire episode to the redistricting fever that is sweeping the nation, specifically Texas, and in response, California. In November, California voters will consider Proposition 50, the Election Rigging Response Act. It's a constitutional amendment that will appear on a special election ballot this fall in the state.
I love the name, the Election Rigging Response Act. That's a solid name. And it is in direct response to GOP power grabs by the Trump administration and Texas Republicans who redrew congressional district lines to gain 5 more seats in the House. Proposition 50 would redraw California's map, effectively negating the Texas GOP gerrymander. But would you believe me if I told you that Prop 50 is about so much more than just responding to Texas's nonsense?
And that is why we're thrilled to have Jodi Hicks, president of Planned Parenthood California, joining us to walk us through Proposition 50 and what is on the line, both in California and for this country. So Jodi, welcome to Boom Lawyered. We are so thrilled to have you.
Thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be here, although I'm with you. I don't want to be working on an election right now. We thought we had another year.
I'm sure you folks were like, we could use a nap.
Mm-hmm. A long nap, yes.
I'm sure that our listeners and viewers are like, this is an interesting topic for you folks to be taking on. So I want to kind of set the stage here. PPCA has effectively been defunded by the Trump administration and Republicans in Congress. What does this mean in terms of Californians and for those outside the state? Like, where are things right now as we're recording this podcast?
So as of right now, then and I know you've dedicated time to this, there was a lawsuit, there was an injunction. That injunction has been lifted. As of this week, we were going on 4 weeks of a complete defund in Medicaid. So that's 4 weeks for us here in California as we're diligently trying to find a solution, but our folks are not getting paid for the services that they continue to provide. And I think what's important is that in states like California, where we have valued people getting access to sexual and reproductive health care, but valued Medicaid as a program in general, we are outsized in how we're impacted here in California, 10 times more than any other state. So we are 80% Medicaid as our patient base. And so you can imagine that's not a sustainable way for us to survive if we're not getting paid for those services right now.
I'm really glad you brought up that 80%. I mean, I'm not glad because it's a terrible position for the organization to be in, but I don't really think folks understand, the significant population size that Planned Parenthood California actually serves just within the state, and within the Medi-Cal program, how important it is to your constituents. So can you just explain a little bit more for folks who are probably thinking like, whatever, you folks are Planned Parenthood, you have $1 bazillion, you've got, you're literally like Scrooge McDuck, like, diving into piles of money, but Planned Parenthood California, in terms of the affiliates and the services that it's providing, is literally providing healthcare for tens of millions of Californians, right?
No, that's right. I mean, we have over 1 million patient services that we provide a year. 1/3 of the total Planned Parenthood patients in the country reside here in California. So it means 1 in 4 women have been to a Planned Parenthood health center in their lifetime. But more than that, they've been at a Planned Parenthood health center at their most critical points. their most vulnerable times, usually when they couldn't get an appointment somewhere else. And what I always say is that means that everyone everywhere knows someone, is someone, loves someone who has counted on a Planned Parenthood. It's why they're attacking Planned Parenthood directly. It's, yes, they're against abortion services. We got that. We've heard that loud and clear, but they're not attacking all abortion providers, right? The description was, if it rhymed with Planned Parenthood, you are no longer funded. And the good part for this administration is they got to attack states like California, New York, states that value sexual and reproductive health care, people, states that value vulnerable communities and access to health care the most. And that's where we are right now.
So it may not seem obvious that Proposition 50 has much, if anything, to do with reproductive rights, health, and justice. So can you explain the link between the two, how they're connected?
Sure, how we're connected with redistricting right now. Whoever thought that's something that we'd be talking about with folks. Zooming out a little bit since the Dobbs decision, California, we've really tried to look at what is everything we need to do in California to preserve those values that we hold, which is people getting access to sexual and reproductive health care, including abortion, including birth control, all of those things. And so since that time, we have invested hundreds of millions of dollars. We have passed multiple pieces of legislation that protect patients and providers, ensure that people can come from out of state and get access here. We have changed our California Constitution to ensure that we have a right. But what we realized over a year ago as a state, and certainly as Planned Parenthood and our political action committee, is that we're still dependent on what happens at the federal level. And we're still beholden to everything that happens, whether that's a national ban or what we're living through today, which is a complete defund. So as much as we've tried to do here in California, we are the most impacted. We are completely defunded, which means, again, as we're working diligently to find a solution, if we don't find that solution, Planned Parenthood health centers will most certainly close as this defund takes place for a year. There's just not a way to sustain that. And so what we know is, since with this Supreme Court, we just don't have a backstop anymore when it comes to our rights. And so every single election is a decision that people make on whether or not we have certain rights and whether we don't. And we have to build up that voting muscle for people to understand that and to vote accordingly, because there's no backstop. So we had a full, the last cycle, we were instrumental in flipping 3 seats here in California because we understood the importance of Congress. We were obviously, as a country, not successful in flipping the House, but certainly after H.R. 1, they knew healthcare was going, and their straight attack on healthcare was unpopular. They certainly know how popular Planned Parenthood is. And we were intending to do a full campaign, an accountability campaign, calling out those legislators. You take away our freedoms, we're going to take away your seats. That was going to be our mantra. And then Texas happened. So then we wake up and hear that, like they do with everything, if they can't win on merits or on policies, they're going to rig the system, right? And all of us were going to, we just wanted to jump off a cliff at that point, that's what we're going to do, is just let them cheat. And then our governor said, 2 can play at that game. And we're in all the way, because we have to do everything we can to ensure that we have democracy, but that we're able to talk to voters, that we're able to use that mechanism to ensure that we're protecting our rights. And I just think that is our future, is looking at elections and having people understand that every single election, our rights are on the line every single time.
I want to ask you a question that I think probably an anti-choicer would ask you, because I read this National Review article by accident. I just happened to read it on Apple News. I was like, what is this crap? But the author was saying, well, the fact that Planned Parenthoods across the country are claiming that health centers are going to close because of this defunding means that they were 100% using government funds for abortion. And so I think maybe some people don't understand how Medicaid reimbursement works, or how it works when you're talking about Planned Parenthood, which does some abortion, but then also does this whole host of other really critical healthcare services. So what would you say to a person like that? And I think it would be useful for our listeners because then they can take what you say and throw it in the faces of people they're talking to at dinner parties or whatever.
No federal dollars go to abortion, first of all. And we can have a whole other hour-long discussion on why that's discriminatory and not good for health equity. And, everyone should have access to every type of healthcare. And when you take away federal dollars, that's the intent, is to make it harder for someone to get access to abortion, right? That's the intent of that Hyde Amendment. It's unfair. However, that is our reality. No federal dollars go to abortion. For certain states, and certainly California, abortion is still allowable in our Medicaid program in California. We call it Medi-Cal, because the state pays for it out of state only dollars. So the big irony here is that is the only service that we are billing for right now because it's paid for out of state dollars. It is
amazing.
All of the other healthcare services, which, as we know, is the bulk of what Planned Parenthood does. And so we are talking about birth control and cancer screenings and education, gender affirming care, all of the other services that we provide with sexual and reproductive health. And actually, prior to this defund, some of our affiliates were providing primary care, prenatal care, there's behavioral health, all types of services in schools and the like. The way that we are in communities and most vulnerable communities, 80% of our patient base is dependent on Medi-Cal. And so those are all the services that we can no longer get reimbursed for in this moment because it is all a federal program and the state is now having to figure out a way, and we're not the only one, it's all states that are trying to solve this puzzle, is how for one specific provider, they now have to pay for everything out of state only dollars. It's a huge hit to the budget, especially here in California when we're such a big part of the healthcare delivery system. If we don't withstand and maintain Medi-Cal patients being able to choose Planned Parenthood as their place that they want to go. And many of them, by the way, also have some type of managed care plan that they normally use, but they go outside of the system and choose Planned Parenthood as their provider because we are a trusted messenger, because they know, they come to us for their most critical decisions. So it's the disruption is, massive.
This is very clearly a crisis in the making for California and for the California public healthcare system. And that alone should concern folks. But let's sort of broaden that. How are folks outside of California affected by the outcome of the Prop 50 fight here? Like, what should we be explaining to our listeners in Illinois, in Colorado, in Missouri and Kentucky? How can we make sure that we're all rowing in the same direction here?
It's so interesting because I think and it was interesting in the last cycle too. I think people just assume California is always fine. Like we're fine. Yeah. We don't need to worry about California. We're so used to giving to national things because we're so worried about other states. But the truth is, if you look at the numbers, California is pivotal in whether or not we can flip the House, right? And what happened in Congress with HR 1 is going to have a devastating effect. I mean, the Planned Parenthood defund is immediate. It's happening right now. But we're part of the healthcare delivery system. And so looking at what's happening to the Medicaid program, what's happening right now as we're in a shutdown because they're fighting for people to just stay in and be able to have some kind of healthcare coverage is massive to the country. I mean, I think the Kaiser Family Foundation said 50,000 people will die every year based on the impacts of HR 1. And so when they're rigging the system so that we don't have a way to use our voices and fight back and tell Congress that, no, we're going to hold you accountable. You're going to lose your seats if you go after people and their health care, then where do we go from there? And so California is pivotal in that congressional election. So Prop 50 is so important so that we have a fighting chance. But then as exhausted as we all are, November 6th, we go right into the next election because, again, those seats here in California, we're going to be looking at New York, all around the country. But we have to be able to hold those members accountable. And also, one of the seats that's vulnerable here in California has the largest Medicaid population in the country
Oh my
and
gosh.
voted for HR 1 and hiding behind what happens in Texas so that they don't have to be held accountable. It has a massive impact on everyone that just wants to go to a doctor next year.
I think it's such an important point for folks that California isn't necessarily safe. I'm old enough to remember when California was a red state and Texas was a blue state. And we flipped that reality through a lot of hard earned work. And, Texas is probably bluer than folks think, and pockets of California are redder than folks think. And so this is really, in a lot of ways, crystallizing some of that conversation. And for folks who are newer to this fight, it may seem like, particularly because everything that you hear in the media is what an outsized space that California takes in terms of its budget. I mean, you guys are a huge state. You contribute so much. As you said, you're a significant part of the healthcare economy generally. And what's going on even in the shutdown right now in the ACA subsidies is all just like a massive transfer of wealth around healthcare. What's it going to take to get Prop 50 passed and enshrined into law? Because, I mean, we're talking about it like it's just very simple, but it's not very simple, is it?
It's not. And what's interesting is we have a redistricting commission normally that draws our lines without politicians. Very, very popular when it was voted in. People like the commission. They like the way that we do this. If every state had this type of system, we wouldn't be having this conversation, right? And so I think when this first became a discussion point, there was a lot of panic because we know how popular the commission is. And if you polled people, which was the first poll that came out, was do we want to get rid of the commission? It was an overwhelming no. But if you pull them again and say, do you want to fight back against what Trump is doing? It's an even more overwhelming yes. And so I always joke that people will vote to keep the commission, but they'll vote even more. They'll, smash their own hand if it means that they can stop Trump from coming in and seeing what we're seeing in Los Angeles with people disappearing off the streets. When we did the rally, the kickoff rally for Prop 50, they sent ICE to the streets outside the rally itself. And so you have people there supporting it that were then afraid to go back outside. And that is the reality here in the streets of Los Angeles and in other places around California. And so people want to fight back. That's the most important piece of it. And I think we're going to find that more and more. Their policies are not popular. I think we probably underestimated and might continue to. So we have to be eyes wide open as the lengths that they will go to hold on to power. I mean, I'm sure you guys will have more discussions about how we need to protect our elections, separate, people and smart lawyers working on that just for this election right now. It's, what's going to happen with mail-in ballots. Every time something like that is working for people to have and be able to use their voice, that's what they want to take away. Programs that they're taking away, like Medi-Cal, is proven time and time again to be popular. People want to have a strong Medicaid program. They want to have access to healthcare. They certainly want access to a Planned Parenthood. And so if we are talking about that and those are the issues and that's what people are voting on, I'm confident that they're going to show up and vote for Prop 50.
When Imani and I do segments like this, or, when we did our summer session episodes with Alexis McGill-Johnson and talked about what defund Planned Parenthood sort of meant in big picture, one of the points that she made, and I think it's likely true in your experience in California, I know it's certainly true when I was living in Wisconsin, is there are a lot of folks who supported their state Medicaid program and had no idea they were supporting their state Medicaid program because of what it was called. They didn't understand that Badger Care was actually Medicaid. And so they're like, no, do whatever with Medicaid, but leave my Badger Care alone. And there was a lot of education around just like getting folks to, understand that. I could see how, as hard of a task and lift that it is, the push around Prop 50 is probably also a really good education opportunity for folks as well, to really make it clear what is happening, because we, still tend to sort of speak in broad strokes around healthcare, right?
What's interesting is we had an initiative last cycle that was specific around Medi-Cal, and we were involved in that. It was dedicating dollars to the Medi-Cal program. But what was interesting about that is I think consultants believe that you had to talk about it from a don't take my healthcare away. But when we did focus groups and did all of that testing, Medi-Cal's popular. If you talk about Medi-Cal, and I think it's the same way that our consultants kind of still want to use words like choice and not say abortion. But if you pull it, people want to talk about access to abortion. They want to know that what they care about, people are fighting for that, right? And at the same time, because there's so much chaos right now, because HR 1 was so massive in all of the damage, I think just the Planned Parenthood defund, people don't know about it and they don't know what's happening. And so this has been sort of, as we're talking about why Prop 50 is important, we're also at the same time the injunction was lifted, we're all that's happening in real time for us at the same time. We're trying to figure out how we stay open. So that has been an opportunity to talk about that as well.
So is there anything else that our audience should know about Proposition 50, about reproductive health care access in California generally, and the fight ahead? Just a nice broad question for you to just let the people know.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I try and talk about right now, and maybe it's obvious, but it's something I think about, is with our elections moving forward, with this sort of, as I talk about this muscle that we have to build for people in caring about each and every election, but certainly their rights and reproductive rights. One, that it's still popular. I think people want to say, because of the outcome of the last election, that we shouldn't talk about abortion or we shouldn't talk about reproductive rights. That's not true. People are fighting and want to know that we're fighting for access to reproductive health care, including abortion and birth control. But also that the way that they're attacking Planned Parenthood, we need to be really worried about what they're trying to do long term. So they attacked Planned Parenthood specifically. Poll after poll here in California, but it's true across the country, but poll after poll will show that Planned Parenthood is, as an organization, the most trusted messenger to people. And it makes sense because people come to us with their most intimate decision making, and they count on us. They know we're there. They know we're open on weekends. They know that we're going to be there for your most vulnerable times. And so it makes sense that they trust us in talking about what's important to them and how to ensure that they have access, or what their rights need to be, how their rights need to be protected. So when they're attacking Planned Parenthood and trying to defund health centers and take away people coming to our health centers, they're also trying to take away that voice that people have. It's a very specific attack for a very specific reason, because if our health centers go away and people stop having those, everybody has a Planned Parenthood story, they stop having that sort of passion or reliance or comfortability that someone's always there for them, then there's no one left fighting a year or 2 years from now as they continue to take away those rights. As we're talking about the economics of it all, as we're talking about elections, we're talking about maps and redistricting that might sound super boring. I think it's important to long-term understand why they're attacking these specific rights and these specific people, because those are the people that show up and hold policymakers accountable. And that's really long-term. All of that linked together when we're fighting for democracy as a whole. We're fighting for people to have rights, to have access to help, to have a way to have opportunity, to have a way to make decisions that afford them a better future. All of that is how they're attacking our democracy altogether. And that's really at the crux of what they're doing with Planned Parenthood, and why we're getting so much more involved in these, things like redistricting, but it's really a fight back against how we can continue to protect people's voices and holding people accountable into the future.
I mean, if I were you, I would just be like, they hate us because they ain't us, right? Like I remember I remember it was a long time ago, but reading one of the election return results, and in terms of like dollar for dollar, Planned Parenthood got a lot out of the money that they spent on this particular election. And then compared to the NRA that spent just probably 3 times as much and got nothing for it.
If you say Planned Parenthood endorses X, people stop and listen because they trust Planned Parenthood so much. And that's not to say like this is a separate, that's our action fund. Like our first and foremost, we want to be making sure we're taking care of patients, like our health centers. We're a part of ensuring we have equity in our healthcare delivery system, all of those things. But what they're attacking is that other piece of it. It's what gives people autonomy and agency and everything that they get out of being able to have access to Planned Parenthood, right? My joke is right now with my team is that we're at the part of the movie where the Kens are all taking over Barbie's house. And so we just have to be fighting back to take our house back.
Take the house back. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And I really am so appreciative of you drawing the connections between the idea of Planned Parenthood as a voice in communities and the redistricting efforts, because this is really a fight to rig the system. If they didn't care so hard, they wouldn't be back up at the Supreme Court. Conservatives wouldn't for a second crack at the Voting Rights Act case in Louisiana. They're fighting over a second majority Black district in the entire state. That's how hard they're fighting against this. And so the fact that Planned Parenthood has landed squarely in the crosshairs is, to your point, actually not a surprise when we see the role that y'all play in this fight. Jodi, thank you so much for taking some time away from all of the work that you and your team are doing right now in California, not just delivering healthcare, but educating folks on Proposition 50, on how you are not letting the Texas GOP rig the game for the rest of us. We really appreciate you just taking time and walking us and our listeners and viewers through these issues so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for everything that you all do, because I know we depend on
pleasure.
you. I know everyone depends on you. So thank you. Appreciate you both so much.
Mutual admiration.
Absolutely.
Society.
Definitely.
Well, that was just a lovely conversation, and I love hearing how Planned Parenthood California is drawing the connection between voting rights and reproductive rights and justice, right? If you can't vote for people who are going to have your back, then what's the point of having the right? You know what I mean? Like, you can have a nebulous right, but if there's no one that's going to advocate for you in Washington. Yeah,
it is. And you know what? We could have had a really snoozy conversation about congressional districts.
Yeah, that's true.
And that's not what this was.
No.
And I thought we might have been going there. You actually were like, explain defunding. And I was like, ooh, we're going to get into insurance again. I got a little excited.
Well, just because, there is that sort of just that view that prevails about how Planned Parenthood works. And it's the wrong view. Like, it's like they think it's just 99% abortion, and abortion is healthcare. Planned Parenthood is healthcare, but they do a ton of non-abortion related stuff. And so just the way the Medicaid system works with how they get reimbursed and how it is that health centers can close. I'm glad she was able to make the connection and clarify that. So.
And even if it sucks that we are in an election cycle perpetually now,
it never
always, every day
ends.
Is an election.
It never ends.
Who are we voting for today?
I'm voting for whiskey. Okay.
Okay. Speaking of, what's on deck? A vote for whiskey.
On deck.
If that was a motion, I would have seconded.
Yeah, seriously. On deck, we have my second episode of Bitch Listen featuring Ellie Mistal. It was such a great conversation. Like, I love talking to Ellie. And I think it's weird.
He's just the best.
He's the best. And it's weird that I haven't met him in person yet. We have to fix that at some point. We have to go out for drinks, all three of us.
Come to Colorado,
Ellie. And we're going to have more SCOTUS coverage with the return of Jess's newsletter, The Fallout. It's coming back. She's back, baby. So that's something to look forward to. Please sign up for her newsletter if you do not sign up already. And sign up for mine too. I have a new newsletter, Angry Black Lady Chronicles. Sign up for both of our newsletters.
It's delightful. It really is. You know what's not as delightful?
So
The
many things.
shield law challenges that
No.
are being cooked up right now. So Imani and I are keeping our eyes on the shield law challenges as Louisiana and Texas try to push their anti-abortion agenda onto states like New York, California. Louisiana also just recently sued the FDA, brought up a new Comstock allegation. So that man, Anthony Comstock, is still bothering us, and we've got our eyes on him. He needs to go away.
If you would like to talk to us about anything we've discussed today, Planned Parenthood, California, Medi-Cal, Medicaid, defunding, shield laws, any of the things, please, you can find me on Blue Sky. I'm Angry Black Lady at blacksky.app. You can find Jess on Blue Sky, Hegemommy, HEGEMOMMY.BSKY.social. You should follow Rewire News Group on all the things. Blue Sky, Threads, Instagram, TikTok. We've got a lot of good content. It's really fun. You should sign up for it. And also subscribe to our YouTube channel because we are back on video. My podcast is on video, and you're going to want to get that notifications for when those video episodes drop.
You are.
And on that note, what are we going to do, Jess?
We're going to see you on the tubes, folks.
See you on the tubes, folks. This is Boom Lawyered, a Rewire News Group podcast produced and engineered by Chapter 4 and available on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and wherever else you can get your podcasts. We'd like to thank Jodi Hicks, CEO of Planned Parenthood California, for joining us today.